Welcome back to Crimson Cast. Galen, Clavio, Scott Caulfield. Back at it once again, Sunday, February the 8th, as we start a new week or end an old week. Would you view our Sunday pod as the start of something or the end of something, Scott?
It's the end of the week. Sunday is the end of the week. Monday is the start of the week.
Okay.
It's been decided.
That's not how the calendar would make you think that it is graphically, but I think I agree with you.
Well, you live in a new world. You can change your graphic calendar now. Like Google gives you lots of options on how you view your calendar. We're not stuck in the old calendar norms anymore. Like we're broken through.
We're putting it to big calendar. I like
this. Big Sunday.
Big people. That's right. No. Well, we're back here again, and it's Sunday, and we're excited to be here talking about IU. As we got some basketball talk. Both of us were at the game yesterday. We're going to give you our full thoughts on not just Indiana, Wisconsin, but everything else around IU basketball right now, where things are trending. Looking forward to that. Maybe a couple of tidbits on the football side of things, as there hasn't been a huge amount of news. It was a quiet signing day. Everybody signed the way that they were supposed to, and we're in a little bit of a lull as we get set for spring ball to start here relatively soon. But maybe a couple items a little later on that. But, Scott, you doing all right today? How are things rolling? You got a new mug.
I'm doing fantastic. Yes, I went to my son and I were in early yesterday for the game. So we went to Homefield on Traks. My first time being there. I've known of it, just haven't had the time to get down there. But walked around, went to Greetings, my old school store, and got this mug, which has, I was telling you about it before, like I love the logo, but it has the full schedule with they're all wins. I checked. It's still all wins. Like it still counts. This reminds me very much of, I have like a weird metal 1987 IU poster in my house of the 87 title and like all the games in there. And I would kind of just sit there and look at all the wins. Like, I lived through it, but it's kind of like, God, what if I was like really old and remember all that? And like, it's very cool now looking at this and like, I remember all of those games. And they just happened and we won them all. So it's a great mug. And yesterday was like the day of, my wife was like, man, it's all coming in because I got an order from Johnny O that had some of the championship logo things. And then a bunch of my Homefield stuff came in. The sweatshirt you were wearing yesterday came in yesterday. And then
not the same sweatshirt, like your own version. I didn't mail mine to you.
Right. It wasn't like Galen gets, that's our deal with Homefield. Galen gets a sweatshirt for a day. I get it for a day. We're really bad at negotiating, pretty good at podcasting, just bad at deal negotiations. This is completely unaffiliated plug. Somebody at the national championship game was wearing a IU jersey with the Rose Bowl patch. I'm like, that is sick. Like, where'd you get that? And he's like, oh, there's a website, the Emblem Source. So just totally unrelated, but they sell the emblems. They have the national championship IU. It's just a patch. I think you ironed it on. I haven't opened it up yet. The 2026. This was kind of one of those dumb, like, oh, well, I need 3 of these. And like, what am I going to do? Now I'm like, I don't know what to put them on. Like I have a jersey. I think I'm going to put the Rose Bowl patch on. We'll see. But yeah, yesterday was a lot of stuff coming in and it was glorious. It was awesome. It's like winning the national championship all over again.
There are some incredibly happy Chinese retailer or manufacturers who are making a ton of jerseys right now with those patches on them. So,
and I bought one. I bought one, and I'm just like, you know what? Because I have a Pacers Halliburton jersey that is not legit, and I'm a season ticket holder. I've paid my money to big NBA, but there's a world where it's like, I'll take $50, and I've lost $50 on dumber stuff. And it's like, if it's not legit and the numbers aren't totally the right size, like, good enough for me.
I'm just kind of, I'm kind of at a point. I bought the Omar Cooper jersey, and I loved wearing that to games. But I'm at the point where it's like, I don't know how many jerseys I need to be personally purchasing at this point. And so that's where I've been going back and forth on, do I get one of these knockoff jerseys from the run? I probably should, because I'll probably regret it. But I could probably do it at any point this spring or summer. So I don't feel like I'm in a huge hurry. And there's always the off chance that Adidas might actually produce official jerseys, which I would rather buy because, like that's at least what you're getting at that point. I don't know.
Well, IU was selling. So I bought 2 jerseys through the IU directly on their, IU athletic site. And I bought the Omar Cooper Jr. one as well. And this was before the Penn State game. I was happy to be wearing it while he made the catch. But the Indiana is it's like stitched in. It has the Adidas like puffed up logo. Like it looks like the real jersey. And then, throughout the run, like I love Aiden Fisher. So I bought an Aiden Fisher jersey, same site. And then it came and everything was screen printed. And it's like same site, same price. And the quality, they were having to make more, went down. But I'm like, all right, well, if I'm just getting screen printing, like let's go knockoff.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the direction that many people will need to go at this point, including myself. So I'm just, I don't know what I'm waiting for, but yes. But
it's like it is funny. We go into the Homefield store. I didn't get anything just because I already knew I had an order coming. Like I had a UPS truck coming with Homefield stuff. But then my son and I walk into greetings, and it's just like, oh, magnets and mugs. It's like there's $100. Like I cannot stop buying national championship gear, and nor should anybody. Everyone should just be buying all of it because I'm like, oh yes, I need a patch. Like what do I need it for? No, I need it.
Myself, Matt Blaska, a couple of other folks who you don't know are part of a research study. I was kind of added to it late, but we sent a survey out that many of you in the audience took that asked you to detail your consumption habits around IU football during this playoff run. The number of people who have reached out privately and are like, I can't believe you got me to admit the amount of money that I have spent on IU related stuff over the course of the last 3 months. I mean, yes, that's what we do. We have to dive into these things, but yeah, no, it's just a constant string of purchases. And this is a great time to transition to our official sponsor, Homefield Apparel, which is where I go first for all of my purchases, whether it's at the Homefield at Traks store in Bloomington or whether it's on the website. I just also got an order, which included this Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl shirt. Love it. Great. This actually, for our IndyCar crossover audience, this reminds me of the Menards paint scheme.
Okay.
You used to see on like the Bettenhausen cars back in the 90s, like almost a neon sort of look. It's really, really nice. Got the
Simon Pagino action. I got you.
Yeah. Got the 16 Windiana shirt. I never even owned the 9 Windiana shirt. So I almost feel like I've been able to skip over it. And I got a couple other things as well.
They have in their store, and by the way, their store has, I know you said this many times, but I've now seen it in person. It has a lot of stuff that's out of stock online. So go to their store. But it has the great national championship bison with the sunglasses and the kind of the Miami vibe. Like that is a great, it's almost like the Miami Heat, alternate jersey. It's like the alternate Miami Vice version of a national championship shirt. It's sick.
So head over to homefieldapparel.com, use the code HOME23, get 15% off your first order. And for those of you who pre-ordered the Rose Bowl jacket or the national championship jacket, they're coming. It's going to be a couple of months. You got to manufacture those off-site and then get them shipped. But those are on their way. So again, homefieldapparel.com, proud sponsor of the Back Home Network and of Crimson Cast. Also, just a reminder, we are brought to you by Posh Hotel Bloomington, and that is the place to go for luxury accommodations in town.
They had a line out the door. I drove out yesterday. I went by. It's like a line out the door getting in the Signetti room. It's great.
Yeah, the bar downstairs, excellent spot to stop before or after games, or just when you're in Bloomington. Great luxury accommodations throughout. I've been telling people, get yourself booked for football or get yourself booked for when there's basketball. A lot of those rooms are gone already. So you may want to go to the website as soon as possible, get yourself booked in there for the upcoming sports season. We know when the football games are being played. We got 8 home games in Bloomington. What better place to stay?
Get little pods, get graduations, get all of them. Let's get a Wednesday.
Posh Hotel Bloomington. Check them out on Instagram as well.
I want to go back to your research study, and this kind of ties into the basketball a little bit. This is the first basketball game I've been to since I think since the run started, but definitely since the national championship. And it is heartening, but also amazing how much IU football gear I saw at Assembly Hall yesterday. And it's really, I mean, it's cool, but it's also it was kind of mind boggling because you and I have also been football fans for years. We've gone to a lot of IU basketball games, and there wasn't a lot of crossover in even gear. You'd see some of the IU oval at basketball games is almost kind of like a joke here or there. But for the most part, everybody at basketball games wore basketball gear. And you didn't see a lot of football stuff at the basketball game. Even, last year when things were going well, you didn't see like the Corso sweater. And I was just blown away, as you'd expect, which is like national championship, 16-0 shirts. Like it was awesome how many people at the basketball game were wearing football branded gear.
Well, and I noticed especially there were 2 girls down in the bleacher section facing me who were wearing 16 jerseys. Now, I don't think they were wearing.
I saw two girls wearing a 16 jersey.
I
Yeah.
don't think they were wearing Alberto Mendoza jerseys. I think that those were made to celebrate the 16-0 season. I'm guessing. I did not see the backs of the jerseys, but
It's like the younger sister has to wear the 0. It's like, I want the 16. Like, sorry, you're together. Like,
no, you got to stand the other way.
We gotta have a third kid as a hyphen. Just sorry, you're the last one.
We're not the Jets. You can't stand that way. The 16's got to be on the left side. No,
the hyphen jersey's the worst. Just the one with the dash.
I'm sorry, Jets fans. That was a low blow. But no,
I know they're aware.
It is funny. I've thought the exact same thing. People of all ages. Well, there's so much great football merch, and Homefield Apparel is to thank for the vast majority of that. But it is going to, I think, be a more standard thing, and it's a new product line for a lot of people wearing things that are specifically designed for football. But it's great, and I think it actually expands the palette considerably in terms of what you'll see people out and about wearing. I mean, I love the basketball collections that we've seen that have been produced by Homefield and also by others, but they are a bit limited. Football just is more diverse, I think, in terms of what sorts of apparel you'll get, and that all really works in a basketball setting.
I will also say this too, that these are kind of high level thoughts, but they continue to tie into basketball. I mean, winning a national title really does help this, but it does feel like we're in a really nice spot where we have some old traditions, some new traditions. You and I used to joke about how football was just this weird collection of traditions that really had no understanding. And like, why do we play a shark song? It's like, I don't know, because we did. And it's like the first down fight thing. Like, but those things have codified. And then at the basketball game yesterday, it's like they play Fernando. It's like, that's just become a song. Like, that'll be a song of Indiana forever, the ABBA Fernando song. And then, whenever we dunk, it's like they do the TJD dunk arm thing. It's like, well, that's cool. Like that's new. And like, there's still big heads, which goes back, 10, 15 years. It feels like we're in a really nice spot with, and then you have like the Mellencamp Hurts So Good song, which is a little more football based, but you now have a lot of little things over the last 20 years where it's like, oh yeah, those make sense. Those come from somewhere. They have a connection to IU. They have a connection to something good at IU, whether it's, Fernando Mendoza or Trace Jackson Davis. And it's kind of this nice stew of a lot of different, traditions where it used to just be like, oh, we're just going to do the under 8 timeout. We have the Candace Wright pants and like, we have nothing else. Like there's nothing new to be added here. It does feel like the doors have been open to make this a more like new and refreshed brand, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think you're right. And look, this is one of the issues that you run into in sports marketing and in trying to have things happen in stadiums or arenas is that marketing departments and the sports business in general has always relied on this idea that, well, you can't bank on success. You can't bank on a team being good.
Right.
So you have to try to create things. And where you run into trouble is, I think, what we've seen with basketball for many years, where there were a lot of traditions that were created in the 70s and 80s that have stuck because there was success. And things, once they get lodged into the brains of people, tend to kind of, that becomes the things that you lean on. And you see this in stadiums across the country, where you've got traditions and items that have been passed down decade over decade because the team was successful when something caught on. When you don't have success for a long time, as has been the case with IU basketball, or you don't have success ever really for any extended period of time, as was the case with IU football, you try inorganically to make things happen. And then they aren't really great. They feel just like, well, someone decided that they were going to do this, and it's the stop trying to make fetch happen of the sports marketing world. It is, as we saw with, the Fernando thing, which I think will die off eventually, or Hurt So Good in the Rose Bowl, and then it pops up again at the end of the third quarter of the national championship game. There's things that have come organically out of the success that IU football has had that are probably going to be around for a long time. And that's how they should be. And it's not that you can't create new traditions. It's just they will always feel astroturfed rather than natural if you try to create them, rather than just the crowd almost like subconsciously agreeing on the thing that is now going on.
Yep. Yeah.
So I agree with you, and I think this is a really interesting point in IU sports history because now you've had this unprecedented level of success. So we were here for this happening. We're here in the middle of it.
Yes.
I'm curious how we'll look back on this 20 years from now, assuming we're all still alive, and think about, wow, okay, that was the point when things pivoted and these things became regular aspects of being a fan at IU games, whether you were in Memorial Stadium or whether you were in Assembly Hall. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, no, it is. And so many, like, you are right, because it's funny how companies, and I think sports marketing departments get into this too. It's like we want to have something go viral. It's like, well, things that go viral just kind of happen, and then the minute you try, like I've often joked, and we love Jeremy Gray, but it's like the rally towels, like part of what the reason that Signetti rally towel went viral is because it was so unique and special. And like the minute then it became a little more corporatized, is like now they just say, bigger, stronger, faster, IU football, relentless. Like, all right, that's not going to go viral. Like you have to let go. But I also understand. But no, and you see at the Homefield store, like the Signetti Marlboro logo thing is just going to be here forever. I also think it's interesting in relation to IU basketball. The big heads came out. Like I distinctly remember one of our very first podcasts. You're still living in Miami, and I'm trying to explain to you what the big heads were at games. And you're like, what? Like they're at Assembly Hall, like in the bleachers. And it's weird because that was something that just kind of like, hey, like we're doing this. Like that was a Crean thing. And it felt very tacked on. And then it kind of went away. And now it's coming back. And now it almost is like, oh, it feels almost more organic now in a weird way, even though it was always AstroTurf in the first place. Yeah. And it feels like, but that's going to stay. And sometimes these things, they do just take time. It's like, with Wisconsin, it's like House of Pain when that came out, Jump Around. It's like that song was a year old. And it's like, this is so stupid. Like, what a dumb song. And now it's like, oh, that's a great, like, that's House of Pain. Like, that's been there for 30 years.
But I'll note the big heads became associated with the teams in 12 and 13.
Yep.
They're probably not looked upon nostalgically if that doesn't happen. And Jump Around at Wisconsin comes out right when Wisconsin becomes a really good football program.
Yep.
If that comes out 10 years earlier and they're at the bottom of the Big Ten, we probably never hear about it again.
And I think about that run, like, it was like Davis, Sampson to Crean, like that kind of funky run. I think that's when we had the IU gorilla in the student section.
Because one of our friends would wear the gorilla suit, and that was I think that might have started as early as 03.
Yeah,
it was post Knight because you couldn't. When Knight was here,
that would not have worked.
It's actually informative for the younger folks in our audience, and there's older folks who know this already, so my apologies. But like Knight, if you showed up with your face painted,
right,
he would have you kicked out of the building.
If you had a sign talking about Rudy and Notre Dame, not going well for you.
Right. Like he would get on the microphone and yell at the crowd if they started to chant like bullshit. Right, things like that, or Chuck Crabb would do it on nights.
He would always say, like, the foul language from a crowd can cause a technical foul, and I was like, I've never seen that. Like, I'd love to see that the first time. Never happened.
I think my favorite, I forget what game it was, but it was Chuck Crabb saying, "We do not use that kind of language in Assembly Hall," and it was just like that. It was very much.
Yeah, and none of this during free throws, like no arm waving.
Assembly Hall felt like visiting your grandparents' house.
That's true. It's true.
It's like
you should have handed out Werthers on the way in with the strawberry candies.
Not the fun grandparents,
right?
Not the ones that take you to Disney 4 times a year.
No, the ones who are like done really well in life, super wealthy, and lots of rules in their house.
Or from my background and perspective, like the immigrant grandparents who, there's like a very specific way you do things, and you show respect in the house, and everybody dresses up in their Sunday best, and that was kind of the vibe.
Yeah,
in Assembly Hall for a long, because that's how Knight wanted it. Knight was, Knight was not a boomer. Knight was from the previous generation. Knight was born in 1940, and so there was a very different aesthetic, and it was a show respect, be respected kind of thing, and that's why a lot of the traditions that have still survived until then, whether it's the no names on the backs of the jerseys, or whether it's the way the pep band plays or anything like that, they feel very staid. They feel very not modern. Even the idea of having a student section at the time, which now we just take for granted,
Right.
At the time, it didn't exist. And it was like, well, we don't need a student section. And it wasn't that we didn't need a student section. It was Knight didn't want us to have a student section. And his like the counter was always, well, we sell more tickets to students than any school in the country, which was true by like a wide margin. But when you are watching Duke at Cameron, or when you're watching Michigan State at the Breslin Center or wherever, and you see these smaller student sections who look like they're having a hell of a lot of fun, it's like, Dad, why can't we have that? And it was always because I want it this way. And so when you get into the Crean era, the attitude has changed some, but there's not the consistent success to any new traditions to the program. And I think in football, you think about all of the stuff that they tried that didn't take, and that's part of the process of, I think, when you're not winning, you've got to figure out, well, how do we make this more interesting and more palatable? As it turns out, you just win. Like, you've got to just focus on winning. You win more consistently. People care more about that environment, and then you can add things on top of it rather than trying to create an environment where nothing otherwise exists. And I mean, it's always been, for me, the counter to the sports marketing arguments. And I see this in minor league baseball all the time. I used to hate it when I worked in minor league sports because it just felt like you cheapened whatever the sporting event was, because you were trying to get customers who wouldn't care one way or the other, whether they were there or at a movie for the night. And I think you maybe you have to do that in minor league sports, but you really can't do that at the college level. You've got to give people an actual reason for being in the stands.
Yep. No, I agree.
Anyway, speaking of being in the stands,
we talk about we started a podcast. What do you want to talk about? I didn't think the gorilla and sports marketing was our first 20 minutes.
We never plan anything out here, folks, as we've constantly said. But let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We will talk in depth about Indiana, Wisconsin right after this.
When the final buzzer sounds in Bloomington, the conversation starts here. The assembly call is IU basketball. Live post-game shows, smart midweek breakdowns, and no empty hot takes. Jared Morris, Coach Brian Tonsoni, Andy Bottoms, and Ryan Phillips dissect lineups, sets, and recruiting so you know what really happened and what it means for the Big Ten season, March, and beyond. Join the live chat on YouTube, then catch the podcast on Spotify and Apple. Just search Assembly Call and be part of Hoosier Nation's most trusted post-game tradition.
Welcome back to Crimson Cast. Galen, Clavio, Scott Caulfield joining you, brought to you by Homefield Apparel and by Posh Hotel Bloomington. Scott, Indiana won a basketball game yesterday. We were both in attendance for it. In overtime, another one, Indiana knocks off Wisconsin, which is always great. Can we just pause for a moment? After years of Wisconsin domination, it is really nice that Indiana beats Wisconsin on a semi-regular basis now, regardless of the coach.
Yeah. I mean, I'd still like to win there.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That'd be nice to win a couple more in the Kohl Center. But yeah, I hear you. We're getting there.
I think we need to go to a game at the Kohl Center. Someone's got to go and break the spell. We've got to go. I don't know if we need to burn something outside of the Kohl Center, or if we need to do like an interpretive dance on the lake in Madison. That would be great content, actually. I think an interpretive dance on the lake there in Madison. But
maybe. Maybe it's possible.
I mean, all the ideas can't.
I guess all content is good content if we go to that banner.
But no, Indiana wins their fourth game out of their last 5. They knock off Wisconsin in overtime, 78-77. There's a ton to dig into with this game. So let's start with the overarching picture of what happened in the game. Another game where Indiana starts off pretty well. They lead 18-10 at the end of the first 10 minutes of the game. And at one point they were up 26-12. And I remember looking at that score. I was like, wow, Indiana's up 14. This is awesome. Will they be able to hang on to it? And the answer, of course, was no. They will not be able to hang on to it. They actually let Wisconsin get all the way back to 32-28. It ends up being 36-30 at half. It felt like Indiana, from the moment when Wisconsin started to turn it around after trailing 26-12, Wisconsin hit a 3, and then they hit another 3, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, all right, Wisconsin's not going to just go away in this game. Not that we should have expected them to. But I felt like Indiana was in pretty good shape. They come out, they reestablish a 10-point lead, and they looked pretty good again for the first part of the second half. And then again, Wisconsin starts to take advantage. Wisconsin goes on a 13-2 run to close the second half, or almost close the second half, takes a lead, and you're like, wow, Indiana just blew another one. This is very similar to what happened in the Nebraska game. But I give Indiana credit. They somehow figured out a way to reestablish themselves in this game. They get the game sent to overtime, and then there's a wild sequence of events in the last minute that leads to Indiana winning, which we'll talk about in more detail. I don't really feel like we've yet had, except for the Purdue game, Scott, a game where we could just look at what Indiana did and say, nice win. There's always a caveat there. And in this one, it's like, wow, they played really good for 20 minutes. They played really bad for 20 minutes. And yet, even though you can hold them to account and be critical of the fact that they couldn't finish off what they were doing in the regulation, the fact they fought back, got it to overtime, and then fought back in overtime and grinded out a win against a tournament team in Wisconsin, you do have to give them some credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start high level for the season, and then the game is, when you look at this season, people were kind of, oh, man, 4-game losing streak right in the middle. It's like, well, based on, again, one ranking, but Ken Pom, it's like they lost to the 11th, 9th, 15th, and second best team in the country is in Nebraska, Michigan State, Iowa, Michigan. Outside of the Minnesota game, this team is kind of like, if you're above the top 50, we have a really hard time beating you. If you're over the top 50, we can beat you. And that's kind of where they're at. Now, a couple games like Purdue, top 10, they were able to win at home. They put it all together. UCLA, even maybe 40 is the right number to go with. Like UCLA, they won. USC, it's like a little extenuating circumstances. They lost. It seems to be right in that, 35 to 45 range. Like if the team's ranked there, if they're above it, they're probably not going to win. If they're below it, they're probably going to win. And, looking at this game specifically, we can dig into all of the pieces. As I look at it, I think in one of your post games, you said it's, two flawed teams played a flawed game. This team is flawed. It's also just a very tight team. And I feel like whenever Connor Enright or Lamar Wilkerson is on the bench, this team struggles. It struggles to get an offense in rhythm. It struggles to kind of know who's bringing the ball up to get good shots. The defense seems to struggle, and those two guys, I would say Tucker DeVries too, but he didn't get on the bench yesterday, so we didn't get to see that. But it's like those three guys are key, and really, if any one of them is out, it's like the team doesn't quite coordinate, and it's weird because you're really playing a tight lineup. Like you had DeVries, Wilkerson, Enright, Alexis, and Dorn, and Miles all played over 20 minutes. Like Reed Bailey had 11, Sisley played 4. That's it. I mean, you're playing a tight 5 to 6 man rotation, and even within that, it's like when Wilkerson or Connor Enright is out, it feels like the team just does not work well. And it does feel like Coach DeVries is like, I got 5 guys. And it's like, how can I somehow work, 6 or 7 in there? And that at a high level, we can dig into other things. There's a lot of other, not shooting the 3 well and still winning, I think is good. But that's the way I view it. Is it's just this team only seems to work well when, DeVries, Wilkerson, and Enright are all on the court together.
I have been fascinated by how little consistency there's been in the same guys playing good all the time with this team. Yeah. And this was another example last night, not yet last night, it was yesterday at noon, where you had a couple of players that Indiana needs to show up, just not show up offensively. Reed Bailey, as you mentioned, only 11 minutes. And the reason they pulled him off was defensively. He gave up a couple of baskets. You could see the frustration from the bench. You couldn't play him. And even down the stretch, like outside of some some specific situations in overtime, you just didn't see a ton of Reed Bailey down the stretch. And he didn't really contribute. He had 1 point. He had 1 rebound in 11 minutes. That's just not going to get the job done with a guy who is nominally a starter. Nick Dorn, who has had a really nice emergence for Indiana. I mean, you figure he barely played for the first part of the season and had a string there of 4 games in a row, starting with Michigan, where he scored in double figures. He had 26 points in that UCLA game. He had 23 points against Rutgers. He had 18 against Purdue. But now 2 consecutive games where he's played over 25 minutes. He scores 6 points on 2 for 12 shooting from 3 against USC. and he scores 0 points in 28 minutes yesterday.
That's
And
tough
only
to go
grabs
28 minutes with a 0 offensive rating because there's nothing to rate.
it's wild. And this is where the fact that Indiana pulled this game off, despite getting nothing out of Nick Dorn, despite getting essentially nothing out of Reed Bailey, despite getting essentially nothing out of Trent Sisley, and only getting 4 points out of Josiah Miles in the 24 minutes that he played, is really remarkable. And it's a testament, as you said, it's a testament to Connor Enright. It's a testament to Sam Alexis.
No, yeah, he was huge too.
Of everybody, 9 for 10 from the field. I mean, my God.
And like how many blocks? 5 blocks?
7 rebounds, 5 blocks. I mean, it was a trajectory altering performance for Sam Alexis. Tucker DeVries as well. I was having a conversation with somebody on text, and I was like, is he injured or is he just not playing well? And their observation was like, well, his shot doesn't look any different than it did at the beginning of the year. He just doesn't seem to be playing well. And then immediately he goes off and hits 3 threes in relatively short succession and grabs 8 rebounds. That's really what you need out of Tucker DeVries. And then Lamar Wilkerson has just been so consistently good.
Yeah.
This is 5 games in a row now where he has scored in not just double figures, but has scored at least 19 points. I mean, since the Rutgers game, 27, 19, 24, 33, and 25 in that span. And what was most amazing about his performance yesterday is he did that despite shooting 1 for 8 from 3 on the game. It was probably his worst overall 3-point shooting performance in an Indiana uniform. Like, he was 1 for 7 against Lindenwood. This was worse than that. So for Wilkerson to continually perform like that is essentially what is keeping Indiana afloat right now. And Enright has really risen to the challenge, especially with Tate and Connerway out, of being the go-to point guard for this team. And he's been much better offensively than I thought he would be, given what we saw his statistics were coming into the year. He's actually shooting threes at a higher percentage than Tucker DeVries right now, which I would not have bet any amount of money on to start the season.
Yeah, no, that's true. No, and he really is. It feels like the engine that runs this offense. I mean, Wilkerson makes things happen, but Enright kind of gets things moving. And then defensively, I've been impressed by him all season. You know, going back to that Kansas State game where he shut down whoever like the leading scorer of the country was going into that game. But last night, I don't know if we want to get to the end of the game, but the charge call that happened, I was telling my friends, like Enright was getting in Boyd's skin all game. Like, that's what he was doing. He was kind of doing the stuff that, the player you love on your team and you hate on the other team. Like, he was just in his head, and, he got there. And to me, it's like part of that call of the charge was what Enright had done for 40 minutes up to that point of just being in Boyd's head, being there, being annoying, being in his face, annoying him, making him play with a little bit more probably passion and anger than he wanted to. And it's like, it was a 50-50 call. I was like, I don't normally see that call the charge at that point. But my point was that, Enright had earned that because of all the work he had done on Boyd. And you see that almost every game. Enright's like, I'm going to get you and I'm picking on you and I'm going to make your life really unfun tonight.
Yeah, the macro version of the Enright conversation is Indiana needs players like this. It feels like everybody else in the Big Ten has at least one player like Connor Enright. And it was one of the best pickups that Darren DeVries made in the offseason, which was, we need an irritant, but we also need someone who can play basketball. Like, having an irritant that can't play basketball doesn't work. And I mean, look, Connor Enright's he's 208th in the country in assist rate, which is good. I mean, that's a really nice thing to have. And he's committed some turnovers, but he's under 20% on turnover rate, which is better than Tate and Connerway has been so far this year. And he's shooting pretty well. I mean, his offensive rating in relatively limited shots taken is 122.5. It's third best on the team right now, behind Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey. And, so the fact that you're getting that and look, there's some physical things he can't do defensively. And when he gets matched up against hyper athletic point guards, it's a problem, but he's been able to fight through that. Now, to go to your comment on the calls at the end, we can talk about those now. I think that call where Enright draws the charge, it's a 50-50 call in the context of how we have seen that called in the Big Ten, both this year and over the span of time. Is it by the rule, if you slow it down, is it probably a foul on Enright? It probably is, but that's not how calls are made. And at the end of the day, when that arm gets extended while the guy's going to the ground, you're probably going to get a charge called on you because that looks like a player control issue. And Enright baited him into it. That's perfectly fine. Indiana's gotten victimized from other players doing that for years. Wisconsin, of all teams, has no right to complain about that call going against them on the road. For all of the garbage about the hall of calls that certain fan bases like to talk about, you sit down and actually meter out the times when Indiana has gotten calls in the last 15 years in Assembly Hall that were unorthodox or not the right call because you're at Assembly Hall. It doesn't happen that much. Not
the thing that I liked about it, besides the call, proud of the charge call. I'm surprised. I've been saying this for a couple of years now, and I was saying this about football too. Is like I don't understand why teams punt as much as they do, and now you're seeing teams go for it more on fourth down. I've still never fully understood why, in that situation, normally the team in Indiana's spot, like you're 30 seconds to go, the shot clock's off, you're down by, at that point, one point, 1 or 2 points. Normally the team just fouls. Like they just get the ball and foul. And I've never been a fan of that. I like what Indiana did. And I'm not sure they fully did it on purpose, but their plan was, I think they passed to Boyd in the corner. Like, Wisconsin kept going to the death corner. Like they passed the ball into the corner and then you trap. And my thing is like with 30 seconds to go, you got 10 seconds, go for a 10-second call. Like worst case, you got a foul with like 15, 20 seconds left. Try and get a turnover. I've always been a fan of like, let's use 10 to 15 of these seconds to try and put Wisconsin in a position or that team where they got to make some plays and like give them the opportunity to make some mistakes. And I love that we trapped there. Wisconsin got the ball up. They took it up to like from my vantage point, the far left corner. And they actually stopped in coffin corner right past the half court mark. And we trapped them again, which I liked. It's like, but they was able to push through, make that pass. And then, the play that happened. But I love the fact that, instead of just fouling and like extend the game longer and just immediately foul, I love, use the rules to your advantage and try and put a little bit of pressure on the other team. And so I love the fact that that's the way we did our end of game situation. And it's similar in football to like, they just throw it up there and like make the ref call the pass interference. Like worst case, he doesn't. Worst case, you lose like, 10 seconds and you foul, but at least go for the 10-second call, at least try the traps. And so I like the design of everything as well. And then the play call, you put the ref in a tough position. It's like, you're going to foul him anyway, at least make it a point where it's a 50-50 call and it went the right way. I will now transition to, before we get to the next foul call at the end, the one thing that I've also not sure I've ever seen is there was the one play early in the game where I think it was Alexis fell down with the ball and they called the traveling. And I just like, and then everyone was pissed and it's like, okay. And I kind of like noted that in my mind. And then immediately like 2 or 3 minutes later, it happened to Ohio State. They didn't call it. And then there was a play in the second quarter where Alexis had the ball. He fell down. I think he might've been tripped as well, but you had every single Ohio State player on the court.
Wisconsin.
Sorry. Wisconsin. What am I saying?
You've been saying Ohio State the whole time.
Sorry. Wow. All right. You get old. Your mind. Wisconsin. Red team.
I mean, they're both red.
Apologies. Thank you for stopping me. Don't know where that came from. That Wisconsin. All 5 Wisconsin players are like doing the traveling call, live ball, like no whistle called. But there is a world where I'm like, what is a travel? Like when you have the ball and you fall down, whether you're tripping, like, is it a travel? Is it a foul? It feels like it has to be one of those two. It can't be nothing, or it has to be nothing every time. But it was one of those where you had a 50-50 call early in the game. And then it's like, you can go 20 games and never see that play. But it's like this game it felt like 4 times where guys are falling and sliding. And it's like, it was called sometimes, it wasn't called the other. Like that drives me nuts when it's just like, just call it one way or the other all the way through.
I agree. It's bizarre to me how inconsistent refereeing can be, and then how much everything gets justified afterwards. So,
Right.
and in the moment, yes, I remember those calls. And look, I think by the letter of the law, it probably was a travel, but there were like 5 or 6 other calls that didn't get called in various other spots that had been called other ways earlier. I have no idea. It's one of the big frustrations with basketball in general, which is that it is so subjective
Yeah.
in the eyes of officials, and they make such an impact on the game. And yes, teams have to adapt to it. That's not the point. The point is, why is it so subjective all the time? And I think in college basketball, even more than the NBA, it really does get frustrating because even within the same game, it feels like what is called and what is not called changes.
Yeah.
And so there's not really a good answer for it. And it's a long-standing problem with the game of basketball, but it does rear its ugly head in games like this, where it's like, all we want is consistency. Just be consistent. Why can't we be consistent with this stuff?
Well, this is why I hate to say, can I bet on this? I'm sure I could on Polymarket, but it does feel like if there's 2 or 3 calls, whether it's block charge, whether it's falling down the travel, like if there are a couple calls in a basketball game that kind of go inconsistently, I'm always pinning it in my head like there's a 30% chance this game is going to end on a call like this. Like it's like you're tempting the gods and the fates if you're a referee when you start being inconsistent with calls or traveling or out of bounds. It's like the game is going to end on this type of call. And in this case, it wasn't that, but it's just like it was near the end, and it was, yeah.
It's just in a sport where what the players do is ruled by what the officials say they can or cannot do. There just has to be more consistency. And it goes both ways. You know, there was Ant Wright on Twitter had this whole sequence where he showed, what was it, Winter, the guy that hit all the shots for Wisconsin. You know, he fouls Lamar Wilkerson, but they don't call the foul because they claim it's verticality. But as he points out in his Twitter, you're not allowed to move laterally if you're the secondary defender. And he moves laterally in the air, like jumps sideways and interrupts Wilkerson's shot physically, and there's no call. Well, this is where the interpretation issues come in, because the idea as an official, you have to process, okay, there's the primary defender. This guy's the secondary defender. He's now jumping in the air and moving laterally while this player is going quickly towards the basket. There's too much to account for. Right. So I'm not surprised when there are calls that are inconsistent because of a lack of interpretation consistency. But it's a lot for 3 people to process on the floor at any given time. So it's like, well, maybe basketball is too complicated to only have 3 officials. Maybe it's too complicated to only have part-time officials, which I've been talking about for a while, and yet here we are, and it never seems to change. So that is frustrating. Let's talk about the second call.
Yep.
That one got a lot of attention online, and then you go back and watch it, and it's like, why was this controversial? Because
he fouled multiple times, and they called one that maybe wasn't the worst of the fouls, but it's like at the end of the game, and he got fouled.
When he gets fouled because he gets tripped.
Yeah, like, and he's driving to the basket. He's being aggressive. Like it's a foul.
Yeah, that one. And again, a lot of the problem is, what are we looking at? And we're trained to look at the upper torso physical contact or whether somebody's got an arm in. It's like, well, the whole body really matters in this case. But I don't blame people who initially were like, well, that was a screw job, because of how inconsistent these calls are and because of how oftentimes you're not focusing on the right part of the body when you're looking at where the contact was. I'm pleased Indiana won. And Indiana's certainly been on the wrong side of calls enough times that you just learn that these things even out after a while. It really frustrates me in basketball how it is really in these cases a matter of, well, does the official in their mind deem this thing to be important enough that they're going to blow their whistle or not? And in that case, I think it was clearly a foul call, but then you get this chorus of people who are like, well, that's clearly wrong, without really either looking at the replay closely or not having the right angle or not being willing to retract when they do see what actually happened. So you end up with this perception that, okay, that was just a bad call because it was a homer sort of call, and that really wasn't the case in this instance.
Well, and the other thing too is, you know, we're an Indiana podcast.
We are.
If you're Wisconsin, you scored 5 points in overtime. I mean, Indiana only scored 6. Like, you know, you played okay defense, but you scored 5 points in overtime. You had the ball. You're up by 1 with 30 seconds to go. Like you know, whether you like that call or not, there's also the idea of, you know, Nick Boyd's like running around with the ball. Just once you have the ball across half court, just stop dribbling and just pass it around. Don't drive into somebody. Like get to a spot where you can get fouled and then you can get 2 free throws. And if you do that, you're up by 3 and you put Indiana in a worse position. Like, part of this is Wisconsin did not play the end of the game situation in a manner that allowed them to get free throws. They put themselves in a position where they let the refs make a call. It's like, get yourself fouled, get some free throws. Wisconsin made some, and at the end, like, play defense where you're moving with your feet and you're not making as much contact. Wilkerson is going to be driving. Like, this is where, if I look at Indy, if I'm Wisconsin, I got the team right this time, not Ohio State. If I'm Wisconsin, that's baby steps. For 20 years in this bad boy, I'll figure out podcasting soon. If you're Wisconsin, look at it and it's like, all right, Wilkerson's going to drive, DeVries is going to post up to shoot. Enright's probably like, we're going to put 2 on Wilkerson and 2 on DeVries and let someone else beat us. Like, do better. I mean, that's what sometimes happens here. Is you're like, oh, they got screwed. It's like, no, they made a lot of mistakes as well. And don't feel bad at all. And Indiana won the game.
And at the end of the day, both teams are still in great shape for the NCAA tournament. And that, for Indiana, that was a huge win. We talked about this last week after the Purdue victory on Crimson Cast, this idea of, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, but this idea of, okay, what does Indiana got to do? They had to win that Purdue game. They had to win the UCLA or USC games. Either one would have been fine. I think they picked up the better of the 2 wins against UCLA. And then they needed to beat Wisconsin at home. And now you've put yourself in a position, if you're Indiana, where you are 16-8 on the season. You are 7-6 in conference. You have, of the 7 games you've got remaining, you've got 4 of them at home. And 3 of those games are against teams that are sub 50 in KenPom.
Right.
You've got Oregon coming up on Monday, who is feisty. They gave Purdue a run for their money.
And what a tight turnaround too. Thanks, Big Ten. Like a noon Sunday game and then a 8:30 Monday game. Like, my God,
could be worse. But yes. And then you've got Northwestern at home. You've got Michigan State at home, and that's a tough one, obviously. And then you've got Minnesota at home. You've got 3 pretty tough road games at Illinois, at Purdue, at Ohio State. The Ohio State game feels like it's going to be a toss-up. But the fact that you've got 4 games at home, and you probably really only need to get 3 of those in order to get to 10-10 to more or less lock yourself into a tournament bid. What you've done here over the last couple of weeks is what was missing. And now you've got it. You've got to win over Purdue, who's going to be a top 4 seed. You've got to win over UCLA. You've got to win over Wisconsin. If you could pick up a win over Michigan State, or you could pick up a road win against Illinois, Purdue, or Ohio State, now you're talking about playing with better seeding. But right now, unless Indiana loses out, which it does not appear that they're going to do, or unless they drop one of those 3 games against weaker competition at home, I think they're in pretty good shape for the NCAA tournament at this point. That doesn't mean that you take your foot off the gas, but given where this team looked like they were at 12-7 and 3-5 just a couple of weeks ago, the immediate aftermath of the NCAA tournament, they turn around, they get blown out by Michigan on the road. This is a really nice turnaround for Indiana, and Darren DeVries, it feels like maybe is finally starting to get that message across about, what you have to do to win games like this down the stretch. They are winning the games against the 50-50 teams, the teams that are as good as them. And I think it's important to, just realize Indiana is not, they're not in that upper echelon. And it feels like college basketball is in tiers right now. You've got the very, very top of the heap, which is Duke and, Michigan and Arizona. You've got that next group, which kind of goes from the 2 seeds down to about the 5 seeds. And then you've pretty much got everybody else. And Indiana has now lodged themselves into that everybody else group. It feels like they've given themselves quite a bit of moat between outside of the bubble and where they're going to be at for the remainder of the season.
No, man, I agree. Like 10-10 feels not only doable, it feels like what's going to happen. And again, if you kind of take the larger lens of this season, outside of that Minnesota game, which was on the road, this team, if you're, above 50 in KenPom, this team is going to beat them. All of the losses have come against teams that are, ranked 19, 31, 11, 9, 15, 2, and 49. That's, Minnesota 74. I'm taking that out. And everything else is like above top 50. So, this is a team where it's like they're right where they are, and like they have a limit where if you're in the top 15 or 20 in the rankings, this team is probably not going to be able to beat them. Maybe on an on night like against Purdue you can do it, but so as you look at as you look at the schedule, it's like Oregon, Northwestern, and Minnesota. I don't want to say are should be wins, but this team has not shown all year outside of that one game against Minnesota they will lose games like this, and they haven't shown they'll do it at home. You go back to the Kansas State game. Kansas State was ranked 89th now. So this team should give you confidence. Like they should beat Oregon, Northwestern, and Minnesota. Like getting to 10-10 and what would it be 19-12 in the overall, that should happen. And then this team has shown that they're probably not going to win the rest of those games, but they could. They've shown like they went out and beat Purdue. They're probably going to have a very hard time doing it on the road. That Ohio State game is a 50-50. It'll be probably like that UCLA game or the USC game, like really nip and tuck. And it's like, can they focus and keep it together? Right. I don't think 20-11 is off the table or 11-9, but that's probably the absolute limit of what this team can do. But I don't think below 10-10 and 19-12 is going to be there either. Because, that as frustrating as this team has kind of been in fits and starts, if you just take the wide view, like this team has told you all season who they are. They're, like you said, they're one of just kind of the mid-level teams. They're not able to compete with those top-level teams. And that's fine. Because like you and I have said going into this year, This isn't a team that's going to compete for a Big Ten title. It's not a team that's going to compete for a national title. But this is the kind of team that, that can make the tournament. And this is the kind of team that, if things break right and things look okay, could go to the Sweet 16. Like they're not one of the 16 best teams in the country based on all of the things we're talking about. But they've shown that, in the second round, they'll play a team like Wisconsin or somewhere in that range. Like they can win those games. Yeah. Maybe they will play a team that's lower based on how the bracket breaks. Will they get to the Elite Eight? Probably not, because they're going to hit one of those teams in the, Nebraska, Michigan State, Iowa, Michigan range where they lose. But, this is a good place to be for this year for this team. And I would just tell fans, I'm not overly concerned because this team hasn't shown that they're going to lose those games. So I think Oregon, Northwestern, and Minnesota are all, I don't want to just say safely wins, but this team has not given us a reason yet this season to think that they're not going to be able to win those games. And if you do that, you're in a very great position to make the NCAA tournament.
You can't afford to not hold serve in the games you're favored by more than 5 points against the rest of the way. But that's, again, Oregon, Northwestern, Minnesota, all of those games at home.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of games Indiana's going to have to grind out. But as you point out, they haven't lost those games at home this year. Even Washington, who is a better team than any of those teams, Indiana figured out a way to win that game by 10. So what I found most important about the Wisconsin game last night was that they won the game despite only hitting 5 threes.
Right.
They were 5 for 22 from 3, and that was the lowest number of threes they'd hit in a win since Incarnate Word earlier this year. And keep in mind that Incarnate Word game was kind of like a game where we're like, maybe there's a problem here because they only won that game by 8. But the fact that you win against Wisconsin largely because you're 25 for 41 from 2. Thank you, Sam Alexis, and thank you, Lamar Wilkerson. And you didn't turn the ball over. It was one of the best games Indiana had played against a good opponent in terms of they only turned the ball over on essentially 12% of possessions. That was a problem in that loss streak that they had where they lose the Nebraska game in part because they turned the ball over on 21% of possessions in that game. So the fact that Indiana didn't have it going from 3 and still figured out a way to win the game really is a good harbinger for what they might do. And they frankly had a bad defensive game. Like you look at the unadjusted efficiency for Wisconsin in this game. Wisconsin scored 1.12 points per possession. I mean, that's not normally going to get the job done, but they figured out a way to make it happen. And that was despite Wisconsin hitting 12 threes. Like Wisconsin out-hit them from 3, 12-5. And yet somehow Indiana figured out a way to win the game. That bodes really well for tournament situations because we know Indiana normally has to hit threes if they're going to be successful offensively. The fact they win a game against Wisconsin, who does hit threes, and and it's not going well for Indiana, but they figure out a way to make it happen. I'm really encouraged by that.
Agreed. And I think this is where you can just continue to shore up the defense. The trouble is you're with a smaller lineup. something Andy Bottoms mentioned on the assembly call. I haven't stat checked it, but I trust Andy did, that, outside of the beginning and the end of the game, our defense, we didn't stop Wisconsin on multiple possessions the entire game. So Wisconsin either scored or, we didn't have back-to-back stops against Wisconsin. And that's something that's also great that we're able to win, but that's something that, you need to start doing that if you want to put together those runs where you're able to put a team away. And we kind of had them. We were in that spot. You're up your 10, you're up by 14. It's like if you could stop them 2 or 3 times and you score a little bit, you could get to a point where you just knock them out there in the second half. They didn't do it. Wisconsin was a team that had a 13-2 run at the end, but that would be something I would look at is, can you start, stringing together good defensive possessions? Because that was also the problem against Wisconsin. Just you couldn't do it for 2 possessions in a row.
Yeah. Well, and there, look, and it's not that it's all sunshine with this game, but we continue to see this team, when they stop going to the basket offensively,
right,
their offense gums up. And there were just large stretches of the second half in particular, but also the second part of the first half, where the offense just looked completely reliant on someone pulling up and hitting a three. There was nothing going towards the basket. Now, Sam Alexis got into the act in the latter stages of the second half, and that kind of fixed things and got Indiana going a little bit again. But it is troubling how easily the offense falls apart. And I don't know what the fix is for that, other than they've got to figure out a way to have more consistency in what sets they're running and how they're executing them. Defensively, what was concerning in this game was, essentially a different version of what was concerning in the UCLA and USC games, which is that a lot of what made this team work early in the season, when they were holding opponents to lower points per possession outings, that really started to go away really with the Washington game. And outside of Maryland and Rutgers, who are both horrific offensive teams, Indiana has had to largely outscore their opponents in order to win games. And that is troublesome. So how does Indiana recommit to playing more effective defense is going to be an open question as we move forward for the rest of the season. I mean, Indiana has fallen to 42nd in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency, according to Torvik, and it has been a steady decline over the course of the second half of the season. You've got to fix that. You've got to find a way, because, I mean, honestly, with the way Indiana's playing offense now, if they could get better defensive performances down the stretch, this could be a really dangerous team in the tournament. Right now they're projected as probably somewhere in the 8 or 9 seed range. If you'd almost prefer they were a 10 or a 7, right, just because of how good the 1 seeds are this year. Normally I'm not as concerned about that, but there is a couple of 2 seeds where I'd look at it and say, well, if Indiana gets hot offensively and hits threes and can play better defense than what they played in
Purdue's a 2 seed range.
Yeah, they're in that 2-3 range, absolutely. Yeah. But what I worry about with Indiana is I don't think the way they're playing defense right now has a sell-by date that goes longer than the first round.
Yeah.
But they have the capacity in them, I think, to play better defense
for the first weekend.
Yeah, but that's got to come to fruition at some point. Like, they've got to figure out a way, because, I mean, it's one thing to give up over 1.2 points per possession against Nebraska or Michigan State or Iowa or Michigan, which they did all of that. But when you're giving up more than a point per possession at home against some of the teams that they've given that up against, or when USC is scoring that much on you, that's a sign that there's a problem with your defensive approach, whether it's the effort or whether it's the design of things. That's what I want to see get fixed over the course of this last month of the season. Like, how much can you improve the intensity on defense? Because they've had moments, and they had it in the first half, where they get up 26-12, and a lot of it was defensive effort. And the fact that they were also hitting shots on the other end. And when that goes away, it's just like other teams score in bunches. And that's what we've talked about with these runs that they give up. They gave up the fact they win despite giving up a 13-2 run at the tail end of the second half in this game is a minor miracle, but that is a recipe for disaster in a tournament setting.
Yep. The NCAA tournament comes second. First would be the Big Ten tournament. I'm just curious, let's say we get to that 20-11, 11-9, or we're at 10-10 in the Big Ten and 19-12 overall. Where do you see us? I've not even looked at the bracket. I know that the Big Ten tournament is in Chicago. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Does it start now? Like, do we need to start?
It actually just started. Rutgers and Penn State are playing in the preliminary round right now.
They're starting playing chess, and they're going to play Dominion and Catan and go into it. So where do you think this places? Where do you think our fate will be in the Big Ten tournament, and what seed do you think we're at, and who do you think we might be playing, as best you can tell? I know there's a lot of other variables there.
Well, there's a great website, which is MRED's 2026 Big Ten Tournament Tiebreaker website, which I highly recommend everybody going and checking out. I'll put a link to it in the Substack if I can
remember this from last year. You can start putting in like what's going to happen in each game.
Yeah. So right now, Indiana would be the 9 seed if you project out according to if Indiana finishes 11-9. Basically, the way it would go would be Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, Purdue. Those are your top 4. Those are the double bye teams or the triple bye team. I guess they're triple byes now. 5, 6, 7, and 8, who would be your double bye teams, would be Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin, and UCLA, all finishing, those last 3 finishing at 12-8. Then the single bye teams would be Indiana, Washington, Ohio State, USC, Minnesota, and Northwestern.
The Big Ten bracket is just insane. It's like just the dumbest bracket ever.
It's very, very silly.
It's like if you're just like, hey, make a bracket, but like I need 28 buys in this bracket. It's like, really? Yeah. Can I do it without the buys? Like, no. Everyone gets a buy.
Yeah. But, Indiana as the 9 seed in the bracket would, they would be playing on Wednesday, and they would, I believe, I think they would play the winner of
Rutgers Penn State is what I'm seeing now off that.
I think that's
website.
right.
Yeah.
So, that's not a bad way to start. And then if you win that,
play UCLA.
You're playing UCLA in the next game with the chance to play Michigan in the game after, which you'd prefer not to do. Certainly. It would be amazing if Indiana could figure out a way to get into the double
7?
bye category. If they could pull up into a tie, this is where, you're going to have to rely a little bit on some help above you. You've lost the tiebreaker to Iowa. You don't get to play them again. But now you have the tiebreaker over Wisconsin.
Over UCLA.
And you have the tiebreaker over UCLA. So if you could get if either Wisconsin or UCLA or both could lose an additional game off of what they are projected to lose, and you get into a tie with them, you could climb into the top 8. And you look at the schedules for both of these teams. Wisconsin they have right now they're 8-4 in the conference. So they would have to lose 5 of their remaining games to drop to 11-9. Here's the teams they could potentially lose to. They're at Illinois, they have Michigan State at home, they have at Ohio State, they have Iowa at home, and then they're at Purdue. Is it possible Wisconsin could lose all 5 of those? Yes. Is it likely that they're going to lose all 5 of them? No. So you almost have to write off Wisconsin as a team that you can catch in the standings. Then you go to UCLA. UCLA is 9-4. So again, they would have to lose 5 games to get down to 11-9. Now their remaining games, they've got Michigan on the road, Michigan State on the road, Illinois at home, Nebraska at home, and they have a home and away versus arch rival USC. So that is 6 games. Could they lose 5 of those games? Maybe. It's possible. I don't think if you look at UCLA, the 4 road games are a problem for them. When you look at what they've done over the course of the season, all of their work has been done at home. They beat Washington at home yesterday. They beat Purdue at home earlier on, like last month, right before Indiana did. They've got no wins of note away from Pauley Pavilion. Like their best win away from home is probably Washington by 2 in December, when I think UCLA was a better team at that point. So that's your hope. And that of course involves Indiana winning one more game than you would think, whether it's Michigan State or Ohio State. That's going to be the equation. So I'm not holding my breath for Indiana to be an 8 seed, but that would be the route to get there.
Yep. No, I'm playing around with it now. If you have everybody just win the games they're supposed to, and I can't get into all the variations of other teams, but if you have Indiana, if Indiana beats Ohio State and Indiana beats Michigan State, that's probably asking a lot out of this team. That gets you to the 7 seed. And then you're playing the winner of Washington, versus Oregon, Maryland. And then the winner of that gets to play Illinois. So I guess the real question is, I hear you on it'd be better to be in that 7 seed line, but it does kind of put you in like, do you want to play 1 or 2 games, the Big Ten tournament? Because once you get to the round of, the games on whatever the Friday is, you're playing Michigan, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska. You're probably in a tough battle in one of those games. So it's like, do you want to play 1 game and then maybe lose, or do you want to play 2? Because if you're in the 9 seed, you win. You probably play Rutgers, Penn State. Maybe you win that. Maybe you beat UCLA. And then you play Michigan. You're like 2-1 in the tournament.
I'll say this: I think you'd want to play. You want to play games against teams that matter. You want to be able to beat at least one of those teams. And I look at it like this: if Indiana were to get up, let's say somehow Indiana tie breaks their way into the 7 seed, it's less daunting, still daunting, but less daunting to play.
Never daunted, but yeah.
To play Washington in the first round, the first game that you're playing, that like a Washington team that would have already played a game before, and then play Illinois or Nebraska, than it would be to take on a Michigan team where you are just like a really bad physical mismatch against them. But, the other alternative there is if you're the 8 and UCLA is the 9 and you beat UCLA again, well, that looks good. And we've seen the committee overrate or overemphasize the effectiveness of wins in the Big Ten tournament or any of these major conference tournaments. The bumps that teams get for winning in those tournaments are disproportionate, I think, to the quality of those wins in a lot of cases. But if that could get you to climb out of the 8 seed range and into the 7 seed range for the NCAA tournament, you would absolutely want to do that. And that's what I keep coming back to, is this idea of what you don't want to do is what Indiana did last year, which is build a head of steam to a small degree going into the Big Ten tournament and then lose your Big Ten tournament opener like they did last year to Oregon. That, not that there was necessarily it wasn't like Indiana was necessarily going to get in, but I honestly do think if they'd won that game, they would have gotten in because they'd won 4 out of their last 5.
Right.
But to lose to Oregon by 13 points in what was a semi-home game really drove the nail in the coffin. But you win that game, maybe Indiana's not only in, but maybe they escape the play-in games. Like, that's how much emphasis the committee places. And it's understandable to some degree because of how narrow the margins are in terms of wins and losses and resumes between those teams that are in that last 7 or 8 in the tournament versus the first 4 or 5 that are out of the tournament.
Yep.
So anyway, there's a lot to look forward to over the course of this next month as Indiana will be playing in conference play. I like the fact that this February doesn't seem that crowded. I mean, you look at, you get the only 2 days off between now and Oregon, but you get 6 days off between Oregon and Illinois. You get 5 days off between Illinois and Purdue. You get 4 days off between Purdue and Northwestern. And then you're staggered about every 3 games once you get to the Michigan State game. I feel like we've had more jammed end of season schedules over the course of the last few years than this. So it's nice to be able to spread them out at least a little bit. Maybe that gives Indiana time to get healthier, get some legs going. They've played now 3 overtime periods in their last 3 games, and they played a pretty tight physical game against USC. That's the one thing about the Oregon game that does concern me, is they might have some tired legs, but at least they'll get a chance to rest them a little bit over the course of the following couple of weeks.
The other nice thing too is that for the rest of the season, we're all in like bus trip territory. They'll probably still take planes, but your road trips are Illinois and Purdue, within easy getting there. You play Ohio State, and the Big Ten tournament's in Chicago. So everything is really within a 4-hour drive of where we're at. Your trips to the West Coast are done. You've taken your trips to Maryland. You've taken your trip to, Michigan, Rutgers. I like that there's not a random, Penn State or Iowa or like, kind of a longer trip. Like, for a team that does look a little bit tired at time, that I know has been battling just some like, flu type, issues, and a team that is pretty thin, just a small lineup of 6 or 7 guys. It is nice that you don't, for basically the next month to month and a half until you get to the NCAA tournament, you may really not have to get on a flight, or if a flight you get on, it's going to be, 25 minutes. So that is also really nice that everything is very compact.
Should be interesting to keep an eye on, and obviously we'll keep an eye on it here on Crimson Cast as we will have more podcasting surrounding this. Indiana playing on Monday. We'll catch up on that in our midweek show on the network. And then, of course, Assembly Call has you covered after every game with basketball conversation and taking your questions. And there's other great shows on the network as well that you can tune into as we will cover this team throughout the course of the rest of the regular season and the postseason, which looks increasingly like it's going to happen. So, Scott, any final thoughts from you before we wrap up?
No, man. Enjoy Super Bowl Sunday. Who you got?
I got to tell you, I don't really care. This
Same.
is the weirdest Super Bowl. I don't think I've gone into a Super Bowl with less interest than this one. And that includes all those Patriots Super Bowls where I was at least rooting against the opposition. I don't really care that much about the Patriots now to root against them in this one. I think the Seahawks are a slightly better team, but this also, I don't know, man. I haven't done any research on this Super Bowl other than knowing that it's happening today. I would probably nudge things slightly in favor of the Patriots just because I know so little about these teams that it feels like it's one of those games where the paper says pick the Seahawks and then the game goes the opposite direction. So I guess I'll pick the Patriots, not out of any great love of the Patriots, but that's just kind of how I feel it's going to go.
I did not. Also, I'm going to reference something I didn't stat check on my own, but we don't have stat checkers here on Crimson Cast. Listening to one of Cousin Sal's podcasts on the Ringer Network, he said this, and I kind of went through my mind. So it does pass the Scott's Swiss cheese mind test. No quarterback with a last name shorter than 5 letters has ever won the Super Bowl, and so that puts Drake May in a tough category. Which I thought was like, that's one of those dumb stats that makes zero sense, but yet it doesn't. When it stops working, you're like, well, yeah, because that's stupid. But then it's one of those where it's like, but it seems to work every single year for 50 years. Just like, so be thinking of that tonight if something happens.
There really haven't been that many super quarterbacks with less than 5 letters in their last name. I mean, that's a really, really who.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew Luck would count, but he never made a Super Bowl.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean,
right.
Yeah, I didn't go for it. So anyway, but it's a stat. I mean, Drake May's there, and that's his name. Anyway, so keep that in mind as you go through betting tonight. But have fun watching the Super Bowl. And the last thing I will say, because you and I always kind of do it at this time of year, IU football has changed something for you and me. Is that normally one of our podcasts around now is when we talk about how this is kind of the start of the really cool sports season where you have the Super Bowl, and then you have the last couple of weeks of college basketball, and then you look up and it's like the last week, and then it's conference tournaments, and then it's the NCAA tournament, and that rolls right into the Masters, and then spring training starts. You have the start of baseball for you and I. You start getting they're going to Barber and IndyCar, and then you have the month of May, and it's kind of this like, I'm looking outside right now. I see 2.5 inches of snow still on the ground. It's like, it's going to be just great sports from here to the end. And I was thinking about this the other day. Thank you to IU football that they've extended the front end of that really this kind of starts with the college football playoff in December, where I was like, I mean, it really starts going back. I mean, it kind of just becomes sports is always awesome, because for me, like, every single week was awesome, waiting for the CFP reveal show, seeing where Indiana was going to be ranked. And so it really kind of starts in August with every weekend you have college football, and then it goes into the CFP, which rolls right into, it's like you look up and you have the NFL playoffs. So, dude, we're in the middle of the greatest section of sports, not the start. There you go.
Going back to something we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, as it turns out, winning is really important, and it really makes everything better. And that is a lesson that you should learn about everything in life, I guess. But yes, I feel like we have been on a great sports trajectory since the Big Ten championship game weekend, where it just hasn't let up since that point. And I am this is what it feels like, I just think, to have your teams be good, because you could make an argument, Scott, that for people in the state of Indiana last year, we normally time out the great sports period ending like after Memorial Day weekend, because it's the end of the Indy 500. But we got an extension thanks to the Pacers and Thunder which went all the way in to June. And then Indiana football starts not long after that, and that's a joyride all the way through. Like, if you're a resident of the state of Indiana who roots for Indiana in sports, it's been a pretty good year, and it feels like it's going to keep continuing. And so it's a good spot.
It's been a good 2.5-year run because IU made the CFP the year before, and the Pacers were in the Eastern Conference Finals the year before. You had these two great runs, and what's really cool is even though the Pacers are taking a gap year, you're going to have because of the trade, a really dramatic, lottery night of when they do the ping pong balls. Where do the Pacers fit in that? That'll be in April. They have the draft, and it's like you're going to look up and you'll have the start of IU football. You're going to have basketball going. I agree that this is one of the greatest, 2 to 3 year spans of IU sport or Indiana sports right now. But what's really cool is everything seems to be on the uptick in that, obviously, I think the Pacers will be better next year than this year. They already look like they'll be really loaded. They could be even more loaded. We all think IU football is going to be back and, at a very high level next year. And it does, with IU basketball, we'll wrap up. It does look like they are turning the corner. And at least, there's pieces in place there. And you can see it with this team that things are working and things seem to be going well. And it's like, if they can just increase some athleticism, maybe get some more parts that fit, a couple more complementary pieces, get the rotation a little deeper, it does feel like we're at least going in the right direction in IU basketball. So yeah, we're in a great spot. That Colts, they got to figure they're a different podcast. We'll put them off to the side for right now. We'll get there some point.
More of all of this conversation coming as we continue to navigate through what should be a pretty good spring. We're looking forward to talking with you folks about it. We'll have more football coverage coming up this week as well as we start recapping the roster going into this upcoming season. Look at what Indiana did in the transfer portal, talk about some stylistic changes potentially coming to the team and more. All of that ahead. Scott Caulfield, thank you as always. A joy to spend a Sunday morning with you, and lovely to spend time with you folks as well out there in podcast land. Be sure to subscribe to the Substack, crimsoncast.substack.com. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. And thanks to our friends at Homefield Apparel and Posh Hotel Bloomington. For Scott Caulfield, I'm Galen Clavio. This is Crimson Cast. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. Stay never daunted. So long, everybody.